Hello, good evening, and a very warm welcome to a first in a line of a Birdcat Wonderland book reviews. My name's Kris, as you'll probably be aware by now. I'll be your host this evening, and as we said, the first in a line of these reviews. And we're very pleased to say that tonight we'll be joined by the authors of the TheArsenalShirt book, which is the history of the iconic Gunners jersey told through the extraordinary collection of match-worn shirts. And tonight I am joined by Simon Shakeshaft, or Shaky, as you may know him, and James Elkin. Good evening to you, fellas.
Good evening, Kris.
Hi, you right?
By the way, can I just say my actual surname is Shakeshaft?
Oh, is it? Okay.
We got a little funny story that goes with that, by the way, when we did the book. But it's not an unusual name in my house, but it's an unusual name outside of my house. And it, obviously, being Welsh, it conjures up a lot of sheep and shafting relations. Connotations.
Say no more. Well, in that case, then, with that being said, I'll refer to you as Shaky if you're happy with that.
I'm happy with that, mate. Yes.
Good stuff. You guys can call me whatever you like. So, so we've got a couple of questions here for you guys. Really, what we want to do is just get a bit of a feel for the book, give people sort of a bit of an insight as to the process that it's taken, how it's come about, some of the content, and obviously give you guys a chance to talk about something that clearly you love, and I do as well, which is the reason I'm here. So I'm going to run through a couple of questions with you guys. I'll introduce them each to you. Obviously, you guys are in the same room, so we'll just take it one by one. And if there's anything you want to add to any questions, just let me know as we go along. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to ask you really was if you could just talk us through how the book came together and just how much work and research that you had to do for it. Shaky, can you give us a bit of an insight there?
Yeah. Well, both of us are match-worn shirt collectors. There's obviously a number of different types of collectors that collect shirts, whether they're replicas, player spec shirts, fake shirts even, and there's the match-worn shirt collectors like ourselves. I've known James for probably about 8 years now, and he's a massive Arsenal shirt collector, and I used to had a germinating seed of an idea in my head about doing a book related to shirts, match-worn shirts specifically. And then about 3 years ago, James said to me, come on, if I can get in front of Ken Fryer, which I think I can, let's go and do it specifically about Arsenal shirts. So I said, fine, if you can get in front of Ken Fryer, then yeah, I'll see what he says. Then we'll do it. And that's what we did. James went, he's a very good friend of James's. It's a family friend of Ken Fryer's. And so we used the it's who you know.
So basically, one of my good friends, Dan, is a family friend of Ken Fryer's. So he said, well, why don't we go see him and see what he thinks about doing a book about it? Because obviously Ken's been there for so long now. He kind of appreciates the history and what we were trying to do. So we set up a meeting, went to go see him at the club, which was really good. He was really helpful, actually, quite easy to set up a meeting with him. He did say, though, so you collect match-worn Arsenal shirts? Which obviously I said yes, and he said, what a strange thing to collect. But he really liked the idea. He showed me some of the stuff they had at the club and stuff in his office, even his old desk he had, I think, came from the Herbert Chapman days, so they'd even kept that there. And then he said, but ultimately the decision whether you can do the book is going to have to come from more of a commercial side of the club. So he then recommended we speak to someone else called Matt Gilmore, who I think is the global licensing manager. Basically set up a meeting with him, which Shaky and myself both went to, showed him some of the designs that we had for pages and what we were planning on doing, and he thought it was a great idea and was really, really helpful. He put us in contact with Samir Singh, who's in charge of the museum at the time. He said, speak to him and he might be able to help you with some of the shirts in the museum, which is what we did. And then when we were speaking to Samir really supported what we were doing from as soon as he heard about it. There's a lot of shirts in the museum and he really appreciated how important it would be to have some of the really early stuff in there, and he was really helpful with that.
Fantastic. So it's obviously a project, like you say, that you guys were keen on doing, and clearly the subject of the book itself is all about the shirt and how it came together, basically the whole history as the name would dictate. With yourselves, or both of you, you're clearly very passionate about the Arsenal shirts. Can you tell us a little bit about how the book explains the history and indeed the origins of the shirt itself?
Yeah. Obviously, when we set out to do the book 3 years ago, was involved a lot of research, because one thing I did notice was that the Arsenal shirt itself carries an awful lot of myth that surrounds it. A lot of that's even been perpetuated by people who just didn't do the research. And so we're in a position where we were going back and trying to right the history, or right the wrongs of the history that surrounded the shirt. Because, you know, as I said before, that the Arsenal shirt itself is one of the most iconic sports jerseys in the world. You know, it's as easily recognisable as the All Blacks rugby shirt, the Brazilian national football team shirt, the New York Yankees pinstriped baseball shirt. So, you know, you see a contrasting sleeve shirt of a, and particularly in Arsenal's case, red body, white sleeves. Everybody automatically says that's an Arsenal shirt. So we looked at the history and all the myths that surrounded it about Herbert Chapman, who's supposed to have spotted someone in the crowd wearing a red sleeveless jumper with a white over a white sleeves long sleeve shirt. Did he play golf with Tom Webster, and it was decided upon then, you know, all those sorts of things. And so that was what we tried to do. We went back and researched the captain's choice, which we'll talk about, I think, a bit later. And so the Arsenal shirt itself, you know, there's the first original myth that we came across was that Nottingham Forest donated a set of shirts to the club in 1886 when it was Dial Square. Well, there's no evidence anywhere to suggest that actually happened, because you've got to remember that Nottingham Forest weren't exactly an affluent football club at the time. So there's no way that they would have been in a position to be able to donate a set of shirts to the football club. There was obviously a big Nottingham Forest connection with 2 or 3 personalities, particularly Fred Beardsley. But what people don't realise is that the day that Arsenal played, Dial Square played Eastern Wanderers on the Isle of Dogs, Fred Beardsley was playing for Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup that day. So, you know, he wasn't there to present the lads with the shirts. Basically what happened was they turned up, they were wearing, they all decided to wear what they liked for that particular game, and at a subsequent meeting they decided that the colour they would choose to wear would be red shirts. Now that meant that sometime during 1887 the players would have all turned up wearing a mismatch of different red shirts, different sleeve lengths, maybe different collars, different shades of red, but a bit like a Sunday League team as it happened. But make sure that you turn up wearing a red shirt. And that's what happened until later on in 1887, 1888 sort of time, when the club went and purchased their first ever set of shirts from Lewins in Plumstead. So that was the origin of the shirt. And then you move to various changes, but it always stayed that Garibaldi red colour, believed to be a Garibaldi red colour. And then, of course, you moved to Highbury, 1913. And the other myth that we noticed was the red currant myth. You know, we believed that the colour that was worn in 1913-14, the first season at Highbury, was actually a Garibaldi red. But someone in their wisdom in 2005, to commemorate the leaving of Highbury, decided to colour in a team photograph from 1913-14 season in a darker red strip. And the red currant name was then invented. But when you look back at history, that team photograph that you obviously see quite a lot of, that was supposed to be against Leicester Foss. We spoke to Mark Andrews and to Andy Kelly, who are 2 of the best known historians on Arsenal's early history. They said that that team never played together until February of 1914. So even the team group is captioned wrong from the Leicester Foss game. And then somebody obviously got a nice little red currant pen and coloured it in a dark shade from a black and white photograph. And the red currant myth was perpetuated. And then as it came to 2005-06 season, it became a very popular choice, but it's still technically wrong.
It's amazing how such a simple thing can almost start what has become such an ongoing, as you say, myth. Essentially, now so many people would have thought that was the truth. James, did you get the opportunity to sort of find out any other sort of interesting facts or certain colour schemes or anything else that came to light when you were researching about the colours?
There's loads of different kind of one-off shirts and things that stick out, but one that always sticks in my mind purely from a collecting point of view is probably the shirt against Lens in 98-99 in the Champions League, just because it's such a rare shirt. And before we started the book, there was one or two that we knew of, but now we've got Tony Adams in the book, which is fantastic. I mean, you don't really get much better than the captain. So to find that shirt, and there's no other ones we're aware of, Gromandis. So to find a shirt like that is absolutely brilliant, not just for the book, but from a collector's point of view, because they're just not available. You can't find them anywhere else.
Absolutely. Talking about the designs themselves, Shaky sort of touched on it briefly in the previous question. There's long been a tradition at Arsenal, and anyone that's followed the club for a number of years will probably be aware of it, which is, as you mentioned, the captain's choice. So I'd like to talk a little bit about, obviously, the sleeves and how that tradition came about. And if perhaps, Shaky, if you can go into that, and maybe James, if you can give us a little bit of insight as to a certain player who chose to break that tradition last season, and how that came about, because I think you've got quite an interesting fact about when that tradition was broken.
Yeah, obviously Monsieur Flamini brought it to the public's attention last season. Anyone who didn't know would have known by the time they'd finished reading their Daily Mail that that he'd disrespected the tradition and cut his sleeves off, not once, and not just on a poppy shirt either, but also then the following game, after having stand-up rows, I believe, with various people within the club. It's called the captain's choice because in more recent times, the captain is supposed to be the person who ultimately makes the decision on whether the team will wear the uniformity of long sleeves or short sleeves. They will all wear what the captain chooses, hence the name captain's choice. When Monsieur Flamini did what he did, there was a lot of press write-ups saying that this tradition went all the way back to Herbert Chapman's day in the 1930s. Well, that's absolute rubbish because, Arsenal didn't have a choice of the same style of shirt in long and short sleeve until 1967. So, you couldn't have mixed and matched a team. That would have meant Arsenal going out with lads wearing short sleeve V-neck shirts or long sleeved crew neck shirts, for instance, in the early 60s, because that's what Arsenal had. They either had crew neck long sleeve shirts or short sleeve V-neck shirts or even button up shirts, long sleeve shirts. So you couldn't mix them up until 1967. So the earliest it could have occurred was in 1967, and our research showed us that Bertie Mee was the main instigator in the tradition. Now, Bertie Mee, if you remember anything or know anything about the gentleman, was that he was a military man, so he was very much into uniformity and regimented, and also he was very, very steeped in the traditions of the club. He'd already been there for 6 years before he became the manager as the club's physiotherapist. So he was very aware of what had gone before and the foundation of things that Chapman laid down. And so he said to the players in the early 70s, believed to be, said to the players, I don't care what you wear, but ultimately you all wear the same. So that was when the decision was made. So basically, Frank McClintock has always been credited previously as being the captain that made the first choice, but he actually says in the book, no, I didn't have it. The decision was made, but I didn't have the ultimate say. The ultimate say was actually a combination of people. At that time, it was Bertie Mee and Tony Donnelly, who was the kit man, the first ever professional full-time kit man in a professional club in the UK, was Tony in 1962 when Arsenal employed him. He was very, very protective of the traditions of the club, and so he basically, with association with the captain of the day, the manager, Bertie Mee, and himself, made a decision depending on weather conditions, etc. Then, when Bertie Mee left the club, Tony actually continued the tradition, and various other captains have always said, up until Kenny Sanson, people like that, saying, well, yeah, Tony would put out 2 shirts, 1 short sleeve, 1 long sleeve on each peg, and the players would discuss it and we'd make the decision. As Kenny Sanson said, if we couldn't make a decision, I would have the ultimate choice, and I would say what we would wear. Tony Adams then became probably the most proactive captain, and he was the guy that used to put it to a vote amongst the players, as legend has it. And but ultimately, the kit man has the final say, really. The kit man, in discussion, sensible discussion with the captain, will tell the captain before the game that today we're going to wear long sleeve. What do you think? Captain normally agrees. There was this incident when Bobby Armitt was the kit man between 1994 and 1997, and Tony Adams decided to wear long sleeves before the game. They'd gone out and warmed up, and he came back in and said, it's a bit too warm for long sleeves today. Bobby, can we change? So 10 minutes before the kickoff, Bobby's running around the dressing room changing everyone's shirts to short sleeves. But it's a tradition that's always been adhered to in the majority of cases since the early 1970s. And it doesn't actually go back to Herbert Chapman, although Herbert Chapman's foundations that he laid down for uniformity and all looking smart and all looking the same. If you look smart, you play better. That's his philosophy. That was obviously something that Bertie Mee was very aware of, and he implemented it. And thankfully, it's a tradition that resonates with a lot of supporters, that it matters, because it's the Arsenal way. It shows a bit of class.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And as a manager of a Sunday League club, I totally agree. I think you look the part, you play the part. So I couldn't agree more. So it's a great story, that. James, are we aware of any other clubs that have this tradition? Because it's not something I've heard of before anywhere else.
No, not to my knowledge. You see a lot of teams wearing all sorts. You even get the base layers underneath. So sometimes it's even hard to know exactly if they're in short or long sleeves. So, and you've got goalkeepers with Joe Hart. He's got a shorter sleeve, as has Chesney. So, yeah, I don't know of another team that does it, but it's kind of nice because it's just us doing it. So,
absolutely,
yeah.
Keeps it unique.
Just say one thing in the 70s and 80s, Scotland and Wales and I think Northern Ireland did it as well. They only used to get 1 shirt for an international appearance. So the kit man would make a decision, and they would, if they were playing in Russia, they would all wear long sleeves. If they were playing in Malta, they'd all go with short sleeves because they only had 1 shirt. So you would see the uniformity there, but that was just because of circumstance, no other reason. Nowadays they get 2 shirts a game, and they get the choice and they get the right size and everything else. So.
Yeah, it's all sort of all done for them, as are so many things in the modern day game. You touched briefly on it there, Shaky. I'd like to cover the kit men and sort of the history. I know Arsenal have been quite sort of not had very many over the years, which I'm sure you can give us some information on. And also, if you can just touch briefly on certain things that people will notice when watching Arsenal games. For example, people will question why we would wear an away shirt, for example, to Swansea last weekend when we could have worn red, and also why the club have or haven't changed shorts in the past. Could you just sort of touch a little bit about kit clashes and the kit men of Arsenal for us?
Yeah, well, like you say, the first thing about the kitmen at Arsenal, they were, as I said previously, the first club in the UK to have a full-time kitman. Tony Donnelly was a Dubliner who applied to the advert in the paper. I think it was the Evening Standard, and he got the job. And with the job came a flat in the East Stand, and his wife used to launder the kit. 1962, he joined the club, and he left the club in 1994. Sadly, 6 months later, he died of cancer, so he didn't have a chance to enjoy his retirement. But he was very, very protective of the club's traditions revolving around the kit. He was very meticulous. Little things like Arsenal, the tradition in football at the time was that senior players would have boot boys, so apprentices would clean certain players' boots. Tony Donnelly said that's not the Arsenal way. So he cleaned the boots with Alf Fields. They used to clean the boots, and sometimes the apprentices would get a Sunday where they'd have to come in and help for a bit of elbow grease to clean the boots. His nickname became Studs, because before every game he would go down to the stadium, whether it was home at Highbury or away, and he would guard the kit. He would stay in the dressing room once he put the kit out. One of the things he used to do was go out and just check the conditions of the playing surface, come back in and change every player's boots, studs, if it needed to be done. And he very, very rarely got it wrong, as Bob Wilson said. Bob Wilson always used to wear very long studs because he thought it made him taller. So anything to gain an advantage. So he got that nickname. Then when Tony retired, he handed over to a gentleman called Bobby Armour, who'd been his assistant previously and worked with Gary Lewin as youth team of physio and stuff like that. Bobby was there for 3 years before the person everybody knows who actually wrote the foreword for the book, Vic. And obviously Vic brought his son Paul into the club in 2001, and he's probably going to inherit his dad's job when he fully retires. They've all three of them, 52 years. The club's only had three kitmen, which is pretty remarkable. But they are all very, very protective of all the traditions that evolve around kit. When it comes to clashes, this is one of the things that Tony Donnelly did. For instance, Arsenal used to play against Ipswich at Portman Road in the 70s, from 77 onwards, wearing their away kit, yellow shirt, blue shorts. And people used to say, well, why could we not wear our home kit against Ipswich? And it all revolves around the shorts. He never used to like Arsenal to play teams wearing white shorts. So Ipswich's blue shirt, white shorts. So he would then change to yellow shirt, blue shorts, so that there was no clash with the shorts. That's basically what it was. Because you've got to remember in those days as well, if there was a clash with the shorts in the FA Cup, one of the teams had to change, not just the shirts. So short clashes came in, especially in cup finals. Hence the reason why in 1978, Arsenal wore their away kit against Ipswich, because Tony Donnelly refused to let Arsenal go out wearing their home shirt with red shorts. He just said that's not an Arsenal kit to him. The Arsenal kit should be red, white sleeves, white shorts, red socks. And so he said, what we'll do is we'll change. Obviously Arsenal lost the toss again in 79 and had to wear their away kit. And then, of course, 1980 became a complication in itself because West Ham won the toss and decided to wear their away kit. And again, white shorts clashed with their white kit shorts. And so Arsenal changed to their away kit. And so that's the reason why. And over the years, there have only been since about 1975, 76, Arsenal did wear red shorts with the home shirt against teams like QPR and Leeds on occasion and stuff like that. Blackpool has always been a problem with clashes. There have been incidents where Arsenal have worn just plain white shirts against with red numbers against Blackpool in the late 60s. They wore the dark navy blue kit in the double winning season in 1970-71 at Blackpool. Blackpool have always been a problem to Arsenal for kit clashes. But then since 1978, when they played Leicester City. They played against Leicester City, 1978. Arsenal have only on 4 occasions worn a red home shirt with a different colour shorts, and each time that short has been blue. They did it 3 times in the 82-83 season, and they did it a couple of years ago in the, I think it was the start of last season actually, in the Champions League qualifier against Fenerbahce.
Yeah.
Where they wore dark blue shorts with the red shirt.
I remember that game well, actually. I just popped into my mind. It's amazing how you can remember such things. It's a photographic memory you've got almost there. And that gives us a really good insight actually into that, because obviously it's not something that a lot of people will be aware of.
Obviously, Martin Tyler's not aware of it, because
no.
in recent weeks, Leicester away, then Chelsea said, "Oh, it's Arsenal wearing." I think did they wait? I think we were yellow at Everton as well, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So he said, Everton and Leicester, they're actually a commercial decision. It's not a commercial decision. It's just a tradition that Arsenal have, and they don't like the clash with the shorts, so they changed the away kit against Chelsea. Of course, Chelsea wear blue shorts, so Arsenal can wear their home kit.
Absolutely, and it would be no good for collectors like yourself and for more amateur collectors like myself, because it would just make the bank balance even higher if they did 2 pairs of shorts every season and 3 pairs of socks. So long may it continue just being a club thing. Thanks very much.
Well, we always say as match worn shirt collectors, we don't look below the waist. One of the things that I have noticed when we did the research for the book is actually the Arsenal kit is a uniform. It represents the club, and you've got to include the shorts and the socks and all the history that goes with it and how the uniform looks. Because there have been some horrors, particularly with away kits, white shorts and yellow shirts and all sorts of horrors like that over the years. But basically, the Arsenal have always tried to be a classy club, and that includes the way the kit's presented. And that's basically down to one man, Tony Donnelly. Tony Donnelly was so staunch in making sure things were meticulous and right, the Arsenal way. That tradition has continued through Bobby Armit and on to Vic and Paul.
It's another reason why we are one of the, if not the greatest club in the world. That's just my opinion, of course. We'll move this along then to, if I can come to you, James. Over the years, obviously everybody's very familiar with the Arsenal sort of red and white strip, uniform, shirt, call it what you will. If you could talk us through, you did touch on it briefly with the one-off shirt that was produced for the Lens Champions League game, where they played in red and yellow, so obviously we had to create a one-off shirt. Can you just give us a couple of sort of examples of some of the, what I would call the oddity shirts over the years, and some that feature in the book that maybe won't ever be seen again, and that were completely random colours for the club?
You've got the third shirt that was worn between 94 and 96, which was more of a cup shirt worn away at Anfield and Villa Park, which are both nice shirts for a collector to get, because they're never available to buy as a replica. So when you find one, it's a player shirt. So from a collecting point of view, it's really nice to get one of those.
Yeah.
So you've also got the Boys Brigade centenary shirt that was worn in 83, which as a collector, again, I don't know of even one in existence. They're so hard to find. They all seem to have disappeared into Aberdeen, I guess.
That's an interesting one, because at that game itself, there's very few photographs of the shirt. It was a red shirt with blue sleeves, and it didn't have an Arsenal crest. It had a Boys Brigade crest on it to commemorate the centenary, as James said. And Aberdeen wore blue with the same crest, and Arsenal wore their red shirt, red shirt with blue sleeves, blue shorts and red socks. And very few photographs, so people didn't even realise it existed. And after the game, the players had to give the shirts to the Boys Brigade, and they were sold, not auctioned. They were even just sold in Aberdeen. So unless we do the CSI search of every cellar and every cellar and every loft in Aberdeen, I don't think one will ever turn up, because we've tried search high and low to try and find one, and doesn't seem to be one in existence.
I think the 1978 FA Cup final shirts is is a nice one as well, because it's the AirTech shirt, and then it was only ever worn in one cup final for Arsenal, the AirTech shirt. Obviously, there's the red home shirt, which was worn in the early 70s. But to have one in a cup final and to get one as a collector again is really hard. So that's a special shirt for a collector to get if he can get one of the AirTech ones from 78.
The unique thing about the 78 cup final shirt as well is one of the shirts we couldn't find as well. Part of the last shirt we couldn't find was the 83 Aberdeen Boys Brigade shirt, but the 77-78 away shirt. Now a lot of people can remember it because Toffs do a retro of it. It's the one with the huge blue cannon in the centre of the chest, yellow with the blue collar and the blue cuffs, and that was quite a popular shirt. But come to the cup final in 1978, Umbro realised, because obviously Admiral and other Umbro provided clubs that Umbro supplied, and Adidas all had logos on their shirts. Well, Arsenal didn't. They staunchly defended keeping logos off shirts, just like they didn't put stripes down the sleeves and things. That was a big no-no. And so what happened was Umbro said, we're in a cup final. We want to be able to put our branding on the shirt somewhere. So they dropped that 77-78 popular away kit and then added the Umbro diamond for the first time to the shirt. It was a large diamond as well. So I made sure that people could see it. And also it was the first time that the cannonballs ever appeared on the club crest as well. 1978 cup final, the AFC cannonballs, which were added underneath the barrel of the cannon, if you remember.
Yeah.
And as James said, it's a very, very rare shirt for collectors because it's the AirTech, the perforated tea bag material shirt. The first performance material that was ever used in a sports shirt, and it is a very, very rare shirt, and the only time it was ever worn by Arsenal as an away shirt.
It's quite a good sort of link to what we wear today as well. Obviously, with the new fabric that's come out, and how obviously we were all delighted when Puma didn't release those to the general public, because I for one certainly wouldn't have been able to cram myself into one of those. So we thank for those blessings, don't we? I wanted to ask you both. I'll sort of give one question to you each here. Shaky, if I can ask you your sort of one memory that really sticks out, one particular shirt over the years, and what sort of memory it's associated with. And after you've answered that, James, if you can give me an idea of one or a couple of your favourite shirts, just specifically favourite shirts, and the reasons why.
Well, I mean, obviously, when we did a subscribers edition of the book, both people obviously joined what we called our roll of honour, and in the back of every book, the people who paid for their subscribers edition up front are on a list in the back with their favourite shirt next to their name. And two of the most popular shirts, the most popular shirt was, of course, the 1971 FA Cup final shirt. I'm probably just a little bit too young for that, but I do remember vividly the Anfield 89 shirt as it's become known. But you've got to remember, when it first came out, it caused a controversy amongst fans because they didn't like the fact that the blue sleeves were added to a yellow shirt. There was no blue trim anymore. Well, there was on the collar, but there was no blue trim on the sleeves. It was now fully blue. And, it was a little bit controversial. But that season, Arsenal played in 11 league games and won 9 of them and stayed undefeated wearing that shirt away from home. But I just remember the night itself. I was actually at an end of season, the team I was playing football for at the time, were end of season football dinner. And myself and in a hotel, and myself and one of the other lads, who's a massive Arsenal fan, absolutely crazy, bonkers lad. We sneaked off while the awards were going on to try and catch the end of the game. And Jammer was a very, very nervous lad. And we were sitting in the night porter's little office watching it on his portable. Well, I think they must have heard us from Hereford to London and Edinburgh and Dublin, the noise he made when Michael Thomas broke through and scored. And the glee that I had walking back into the room and just going around all the tables of all the Liverpool players, the Liverpool fans sat at tables, just to say, by the way, you just lost the league at home to Arsenal 2-0. So Mickey Thomas, you know, I've got a lot to thankful for with Mickey Thomas, because everybody loves to be able to take the mick out of the Liverpool fans, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And you say so almost you became the female character in Fever Pitch then, almost sneaking off to get the results. So it's
Absolutely, yeah.
quite a
Not
nice.
the first people to female, by the way.
Absolutely. James, what about yourself? What sort of shirts over the years have become favourites to you, whether sort of ones you own or just ones you've seen?
My personal favourite's the 1932 FA Cup final shirt. I think just because of its age, rarity, and the crest on the shirt is probably my favourite, actually. When we did the photographing of the shirts in the museum at the club, because the club kindly lent us a box for the day to take all the pictures in, when we actually photographed Charlie George's 1971 FA Cup final shirt, we actually bumped into him while we had the shirt in our hand, which is kind of nice to talk to a player like that.
Yeah.
Whilst you've actually got the shirt in your hand. So
I would say, as a match one shirt collector, Chris, it was quite a horny experience, to be fair.
I don't think it gets much better than that, really.
I don't think it does, no.
but if you look at all the shirts kind of evoke an emotion when you look at the more modern stuff. For me, if you look at the Invincibles shirt, it's a plain, pretty simple shirt, but you look at winning the league at White Hart Lane, which is an Arsenal fan, it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
All season unbeaten. I love the gold shirt as well from 01-02, because everyone remembers the pictures of seeing us celebrate winning the league at Old Trafford. It's just, for an Arsenal fan, they're just such special memories. As soon as if you're just looking through the book, you just look at the pictures, and it just all brings it all back, brings it all to life again.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, and I think that one thing that the book really beautifully sort of, from my point of view, displays is, I think everyone has, when you think of an Arsenal memory, or when you think of a memory of a certain incident or a certain game, the first thing you think of is the shirt, and as you say, the memories of that shirt will almost be the first almost colour picture of what was happening that day. So I think that was really, really nicely put, and it comes across brilliantly in the book when you can see the picture, then you can read about it. I think it really sort of pops that out beautifully well. So props on that, absolutely.
We had some just speaking to the players, we got some fantastic stories from them. So when we spoke to Alan Smith, and he was telling us about his Cup Winners' Cup final shirt from '94, he said that if you look carefully, there's actually blood stains in the back of the collar where the defender was scratching his neck during the game. So little stories like that. I spoke to John Samuels, and he was saying when he was a kid growing up, all he wanted was an Arsenal shirt, but because buying replicas wasn't available then, so his mum actually bought a plain white long sleeve shirt, cut the sleeves off, dyed the body red, and sewed them back on.
Brilliant.
He actually says he still has that shirt.
Yeah.
When he was a little boy. So things like that just shows you how much it means to the players.
And yeah, that whole book for us, you see, when you open the page, as you say, it evokes memories, good or bad, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the two things that always made me smile, and we, you know, particularly the 1982-83 away kit, the green one, which Terry Neal very, very poignantly pointed out in his notes that it wasn't his decision to wear green kit, although he's an Irishman. It had nothing to do with the use of that kit, the choice of that kit. At the time, it was despised by the old traditionalists and the older Arsenal fans, but bought in droves by the kids. It's a very good seller. And the reason it wasn't continued for the following season was because the players didn't like it. It was actually, they played away at Southampton. The team played at the Dell at Southampton at the end of December in 82-83 season. And by the end of the game, they couldn't see each other, because when you sweated into the shirt, and if it was raining or whatever, then the shirt got darker. And under floodlights in the 80s, of course, they weren't as good as they are now. You know, you couldn't pick each other out. So Arsenal technically had an invisible kit long before Mr. Rednose and his crew at the same venue, you know, 13 years later, whatever it was. But and of course, the two kits that were not very popular at the time that have become cult kits now that everyone wants to try and buy. The green kit I just mentioned, and the bruised banana kit.
Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's one of my particular sort of favourites, just for a random kit. But you're absolutely right. It seems to be the
Everybody
most.
had a kit like that, though, Chris, didn't they? Everybody had a kit. You know, there's some absolute horrors out there at that
Oh,
particular time,
absolutely. Yeah,
the
and
early '90s.
I think you only even now you look at modern day shirts. There's some shockers out there. It has to be said. So I think we're quite lucky to have had some of the nice ones that we've had over the years. One final question from me before we wrap this up, if I may, and obviously to both of yourselves. Can you just tell us a bit? I understand the passion. I've collected shirts for many years, and whilst I have nowhere near as nice a collection as yourselves, it's something that I'm quite passionate about. Can you just explain to the listeners what sort of made you become shirt collectors? How you sort of went about sourcing some of the shirts that you've got, and more importantly, how on earth you managed to store all these shirts?
Well, actually, it's my fault. James collects football shirts, to be fair, because he obtained a shirt that originally I'd had, and he obtained it from the person who took it from me. And so I got a phone call one day asking about the shirt and whether it was genuine, and a lot of questions like that. And after 2 hours of boring the pants off him on the phone, I got him hooked onto collecting match-worn shirts. But I personally started, I used to work in football, and I started, you know, when we played bigger teams, because I only worked in the lower reaches of the football league at clubs. When we played bigger teams in cup competitions, I used to try and get a shirt, especially around the time when names were introduced to shirts, you know, in 93, 94 season. You know, so you had a nice memento of the game. And for me, that it progressed from there, you know, over time. But the places that we get asked quite a lot, I think, by people, you know, how can I get the shirts? One thing you mustn't ask a shirt collector, if they have good contacts and are able to get genuine shirts, because obviously there's a lot of fakes out there, to get genuine shirts, don't ask them where they can get them from, because they're never going to tell you that bit of information. It's like asking a lady her age, you know, it's not going to actually tell you. So, you know, don't ask where they come from, because if they come from within a club, from a genuinely good source, they're not going to tell you that.
No,
because put people under pressure, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And same to you, sort of, James. How do you manage to store all these shirts? Have you got like a massive lockup or a massive garage, or does the missus sort of get a bit tired of opening a cupboard and finding another shirt somewhere?
It's kind of hard at the moment because they were all stored away. But since we've done the book launch and the photo shoot we had to do for the book, I've kind of had shirts everywhere, as you can imagine, getting them out ready for different things. But normally, just they're kind of airtight bags and then in a lockdown crate. But it's kind of a shame, really, because you want to have them on display, but when you keep so many, it's hard to display all of them. Sometimes I have some mannequins out and just put the odd favourite one at the time on, but I've got quite a few framed around the games room, which is quite nice. But I started off by framing them all as I got them, and then as your collection gets more and more and more, because it just kind of started out with just trying to get my heroes. So when I first started, I just wanted a Thierry Henry shirt, and then when one became available from the Juventus game, which we won at Highbury, when we played against Vieira, I had to have that one, so I bought it, and that was how I met Shaky, as he said. But then you want to get an Ian Wright and a Bergkamp, and you want to put them on the wall and keep them so everyone can see them, but you just keep getting so many, it's hard to display them all. And then, as you said, the missus doesn't become too happy when you're trying to hang shirts in the bedroom. It's not not her cup of tea.
Especially the unwashed ones. They always go down really well. But, you know, Chris, you'll know as a collector yourself that, you know, presentation isn't that important. You know, a lot of people will say, "Oh, what are you going to get? You're going to get your match-worn shirts framed." Well, personally, I don't like getting my match-worn shirts framed, and I'm not too sure that James does anymore, because you can't touch them. You can't take them out of the frame and look at them, and that's a sad thing that us anoraks that collect football shirts do, as you'll appreciate.
Yeah.
So, but you know, when you talk about where to get them from, you talk about you know, contacts, people who can actually access the shirts. But there's other avenues. You know, there are online auctions, and they do sell genuine shirts occasionally.
Yeah.
You've got various websites. You've got other collectors. You've got auction houses. You know,
Yeah.
you look at some of the prices Arsenal shirts have realised that auction houses have been astronomical. You know, £24,000 for Joe Mercer's shirt from 1950 FA Cup final.
Jesus.
£14,000 recently for Perry Groves' shirt from the 1989 Anfield game.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely astronomical prices. But just you know, anybody who's listening to this can say, flipping heck, I can't afford to collect match-worn shirts. But let me just say, for a little snip of that, those sorts of prices, you can obtain a genuine Arsenal match-worn shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And nicely mentioned Perry Groves. We had him on the podcast last week, and his sort of talked about his passion for the shirt, and it really sort of came across in that interview. So it's nice to mention that name. Absolutely.
But with that, Chris, you see, that's what resonated throughout the interviews we did with all the players.
Yeah.
They all talked about how passionate they were about being able to put that shirt on, what it meant to be able to put the shirt on, how much the club meant to them. We didn't speak to anybody that would say a bad word about the club.
No.
You know, that crest and that kit, that shirt, just was so important to them. You know, they would, you know, people like Tony Adams and that would die for it, wouldn't they? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would 100% encourage anyone listening to this to purchase the book. It is a fantastic read, and as we've sort of mentioned across the course of this evening's chat, there's so many memories. You know, we could literally talk 4 hours, but time does beat us eventually. But I would just like to give you guys sort of a quick sort of shout as to where to pick the book up from. I believe I'm right in saying if you visit your website, which is TheArsenalShirt.com, you can follow the links to purchase the book directly from there. Also at TheArsenalShirt on Twitter. Shaky, your Twitter handle is at ShakyMatchworn, and James, yours is at ArsenalMW MW for Matchworn, obviously. I'd like to thank you both for coming on this evening. Was there anything else that you'd like to sort of say, and just summing up, or anything that you'd like to give our listeners, any sort of specific nuggets that's worth picking out in the book before we leave?
Who was the first player to go against the tradition of short and long sleeve? That's in the book. Actually, had a hyper game as well. The one thing I'd also like to say, Chris, is that the club are stocking the book. So if you turn up on match days and fancy dropping in the armoury, I know certain people amongst the ABW crew don't go into the armoury to buy things, but you can hopefully go in there and buy it now. They've taken an order from our publishers, so it will be stocked in there. Hopefully they'll sell out of this first initial order, and then there'll be some more in there for Christmas. But unfortunately, you might have to pay the full price for the book. And it is cheaper available online elsewhere. But it affects us poor little authors then, you know what I mean? We don't get the
Oh, absolutely.
don't get the necessary royalties.
We'd certainly always suggest people buy it from the official sources, and I think for the amount of effort that you guys have put into making this what it is, I think that's the least people could do. So we'll certainly encourage that. But guys, it's genuinely been a pleasure for me. Obviously, when we thought about putting some books together, this was the first one that I jumped on as a collector myself. So it really has been a privilege to have you guys on. I know that you are going to. You've been very kind in giving us one of the books to give away on the podcast. So I thank you for that. We'll be recording a quick question at the end of this when we've gone off air, which we'll have for the listeners to see if they can crack the code to win that book. So I'm sure if when the winner of that book receives the prize, I'm sure they'll be happy to thank you as well. But just on behalf of myself and obviously all the guys from a Birdcat Wonderland, we'd like to thank you both for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot for having us. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely, anytime. And thank you all for listening. And we will see you again for another Birdcat Wonderland book review. Good night, all. For those of you that listened to the interview about the Arsenal Shirt book, we were lucky enough to have the authors of the book do us an individual book review. And they were very kind in giving us the opportunity to give away a book as part of a prize. And I'm now going to hand you over to Shaky, one of the authors, who's going to give you the question that we require answering for a chance to win this brilliant book. Shaky.
Right, the question we want answered to possibly win or to be in with a chance to win the book is: which person is credited with designing Arsenal's first red body, white sleeved shirt in 1933.
So to be in with a chance of winning this book, if you tweet us using the hashtag ABWArsenalShirtBook, we will sort through the correct entries and announce the winner in due course.